Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this morning. We appreciate you coming out and joining in this virtual environment for the North Carolina Association of Fire Chiefs and North Carolina Fire Chief Consulting coming together in order to put some educational material out to the fire chiefs across our state. So we thank you for being here and providing your time and attention this morning. It's great to see everyone here and being with us today. We will be capturing this information as we go through the program today, and we'll be putting this out on our website. NCAFC may want to do so as well, so we'll be capturing that. Just want to make sure that we give that word out to everyone here today. My name is Greg Grayson. I'm with North Carolina Fire Chief Consulting. A number of the members of our team with NC Fire Chief Consulting are here with us today as well. David Bullens, Chief Wes Hutchins, Chief Frank Blackley, Chief Chris Perry, Chief Wayne Hamilton, Chief Todd Tuttle, all I think will be with us here today. Chief Wes Green and Chief Mike Varnell are both committed in other areas today and will not be able to be with us, but they'll be joining in other programs that we do. So we're glad to have all of our staff here with us here today and look forward to talking to you and sharing some information with you here today. We do want to thank, again, everyone for attending today, but we also want to thank those of you that participate in a survey. We have been working with the Association of Fire Chiefs for some time, and they were willing to put a survey out and partner with us in doing this program. And so we thank you for participating in that survey. We had about 255 people respond. And what we're trying to do is provide the areas that the folks said that were of interest to them. So we certainly appreciate that and thank you for participating in that survey. And we'll show you that here this morning briefly. We also want to thank the Association of Fire Chiefs Board for their willingness to collaborate with us in providing this assistance to fire chiefs across our state. And we also want to thank Executive Director Chief Jay Quisnett. Chief Quisnett sent me a message this morning. He's not able to be with us today, but he's very supportive and wants to send his greetings to everyone here today. So that we know that your time is very valuable, and we have some information we'll share with you. The format of these programs is simply to provide some information that's out there, and then we will certainly respond to questions that you might have. We'll have a roundtable type discussion here in the virtual environment during this time of pandemic. Other programs that we've done similar to this work really well if you can send your questions in on chat. We've got quite a few participants here today, so sometimes it's hard for everybody to be heard, but you can send your information in on the chat and we'll respond to those accordingly. We'll try to keep the educational piece to about 30 minutes, and then we'll take whatever time is needed to make sure questions are answered from our entire group today. Okay. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate the opportunity to share with you here today. So we're going to go ahead and pull our screen over and share this with you. Again, we do plan to put this out on the website and make it available to you and be able to share this information with you accordingly. So this is an effort. We have agreement to do this for a 3-month period, October, November, and December. And we may do it longer than that if there's interest. And so we just will look to you to see if this is helpful or valuable or assistance to you anyway. Today's topic is strategic planning. That was one of the most asked for topics from across the chiefs that responded to the survey. And we did have great responses also from the Piedmont, East, as well as Western areas of our state. So the purpose of this program is just educate and inform of fire chiefs. Our whole group is served as fire chiefs. Several of us are retired, some are still in service, but we know that keeping abreast of topics and changes and what's happening in North Carolina and what the trends are and challenges are is important. It's important for all of us to keep up with things that are happening in order to stay relevant. We have to stay current and vice versa. So we're just simply here to try to inform of some of that information, and we'll vary these based upon what your needs and issues are. But we want to try to keep that within about a 30-minute time period, and then we'll have some peer discussion on topics. And so you're going to have ideas and suggestions, questions, and maybe something that you're thinking about that somebody else is asking about as well. So we all learn from each other. And we did have about 255 folks that responded and provided the feedback to give us a track on where to go. We are planning to talk about strategic planning here this month or next month. We're going to talk about professional development, and then December station locations is our tentative plan. If you look at these charts, there's lots of numbers moving on here, but we would just say the majority of our respondents, about 52+%, said Wednesdays are the best day. 40, almost 45% said 10 o'clock is the best time. Looking strategic planning, over 57% of respondents said that was a topic of interest. If you look down here, professional development, almost 54, and fire station planning, almost 33. So when you look at those are topics we are looking at. Community risk reduction, we are planning to do a program on that as well. That may roll over into January, but we'll try to follow these accordingly. And we've talked with Chief Wisnott about doing another survey in December or so and see if this is helpful or effective, or how do we need to change it in order to make it better. You're also welcome to let any of the 10 of us know needs that you might have between now and then, and we'll be glad to respond accordingly. Who is NC Fire Chief Consulting? We are the North Carolina League of Municipalities fire consulting provider. We provide all areas of fire consulting in North Carolina. Part of our contract with the league is that any municipality can say we need this assistance, and we either provide it directly or we partner with somebody to provide that. So we do a number of different things. Strategic planning is something we do quite a bit of. We have helped a number of cities and counties in North Carolina in that endeavor. We help with standards of cover, contracts. We're working with several departments on transitioning from private nonprofit corporations to municipalities where that's appropriate or where it's time to do that. We do quite a bit of station placement work as well, and quite a bit of promotional processes, both primarily executive, chief, deputy chief, but we also do some others as well. We help with HR type things, from 360 reviews to assessments and those types of processes, and then help some with apparatus evaluation and capital improvement. And then we will help if something doesn't go well. You need a third party to come in and look at what went well, what did not, kind of a post-incident type analysis. So we try to help with those type things as well. But bottom line, if you've got a consulting need or that type thing, then we strive to help our North Carolina cities and counties. We are very North Carolina based. 97% of what we do is North Carolina, and that's our home, and this is where we're all from, and so we take great pride in serving North Carolina. Here's just a few of the jurisdictions that we have helped here recently, and you might recognize some of the folks on here. This is some folks we have worked with in one way or another, and we appreciate everyone who has entrusted us to serve them in a consulting capacity. So as we go through and discuss some of these pieces today, my colleagues may jump in at any time and add something. We're going to go through some of the strategic planning information, but I encourage all of them just to step in and speak up whenever is needed. When we start thinking about all the work that we're doing here and the efforts we can with strategic planning, it's really about continuous improvement. What are we doing today? What can we do differently? Let's implement something differently. Let's reevaluate. So you see this circle here, looking at those opportunities that might exist. What's the current conditions? What plans do we make for improvement? We implement changes, we review it, we adjust accordingly. And so that's really a principal concept of strategic planning. If you leave with nothing today, think about strategic planning is continuous improvement. It's always evolving. I think it's a project that's never done. Here's where we are. Here's things we're going to work on. Here's some needs we have to address. We work on those. We see how that has changed conditions, and then we move forward from there. Not many of us got into fire service to be doing strategic planning. That wasn't what I think most of us got into this to be. Back when we were a few years younger, as you might see in a photo here, when you were a few years younger, that wasn't what we were working on. I've got my recruit class picture down here in the bottom because Jake Wisnott, I was hoping he was going to be on today. He was actually one of my instructors in my fire academy. So that's not what we joined up with it. But what we joined to do, what we joined the fire department to do, was to help our community and protect life and property. And a way to do that is strategic planning. And it's really become essential for any fire service leader today to be involved in strategic planning at some level. And we hopefully will give you some tips and ideas to think about that. It can be a number of different levels, but being involved with it in some way is certainly an important piece of a fire chief's role today. So why is it important in 2020? Got some pictures up here. Elected officials, I've got them in the middle here. These are a couple state representatives that support some of the fire service programs that are happening in the state. We've got a fire station over here from Cary on one side. We've in a municipal area, like an infill station at Cary did. We've got a rural station out in Gaston that in the eastern part. We've got some special needs in Cornelius over here. I've got a Nags Head truck. We've done some work for Nags Head as well. Different groups really are seeing some changes in the fire service as North Carolina urbanizes. So, we're one of the top 10 largest states in the country now. And so with that comes lots of changes. The cost of our equipment has dramatically increased. The cost of building a fire station dramatically increased. The need for collaboration with elected officials. These happen to be state representatives here, but whether they're local or state representatives or even federal representatives, the connections there. This over in the latter truck, that's a city manager, and the importance of having city managers understand what you do and how you do it. Many of them will be attuned to working with strategic plans. So our fire service is evolving, and I think in so many cases throughout our state, the transition between volunteer and combination systems to more and more career side is certainly changing a lot of the cost dynamics in what we do, and thus the need for having that strategic planning becoming more and more important. If you and your people don't know where you're going, your leadership doesn't matter. That's a statement from Ken Blanchard. And so leadership's about going somewhere, knowing where you're going and having a direction. So I think I have a slide coming up that talks about using a GPS. So it's kind of like, here's where we're trying to go to. And the need for you as a fire service leader to understand that, and then your folks to understand that. Not just you, but folks within your organization. Here's where we are, here's where we're trying to move to, here's where we're going. And so if you and your people don't know where you're going, your leadership doesn't matter. We've got some great leaders in the fire service in North Carolina. Just every time I have an opportunity to interact with folks, we see the blessing we have on so many folks that are great leaders, and being able to have such skills, but knowing a direction, knowing where you're heading, knowing where you're going. Maybe I would suggest not just within the department, but also so that your municipality knows or your county government knows. That it moves maybe beyond the fire department, so others understand what you do and how you're trying to move forward. A couple of things that are important components of strategic planning is having a mission for the organization. Most of us somehow, lots of folks will have elaborative words sometimes, but at the end of the day, our mission is to protect life and property. And we may do that in different ways, or things are custom for our organization. But we also need to mesh with that some vision. Here's what we want to do. Here's what we're trying to get to. And these are our values for our organization. These are the things that are most important to us in this organization that you're a part of. So some of those pieces certainly weave into strategic planning. The slide down here at the bottom, good and bad. I think the question I hear the most from city, town managers, and sometimes county staff as well is, what is good? What does good look like? What we don't know quite what good is. Our fire department performs at this level. Is that good or is it not? So trying to show putting some of that in context. What is effective? What's not? Where are you within, say, national standards or North Carolina benchmarks? Those type things. And then trying to use data and information. We as our society has changed and we become so much more urban in North Carolina, I see a significant amount of interest in more and more data and what do the numbers say? And that's a little bit of a transition for some communities, and moving away from, well, this is what we feel like we need, or this is the sentiment, having more data. And that really relates to things being more objective And what do the numbers say? What does the data say? What do the standards say? What does our performance say? So as we think about some of those components, we just say those are a few of the academic pieces, but mission, vision, and values, always an important piece to look at when you think about strategic planning, because does what we're doing tie into the mission? Does it tie into the vision? Does it tie into the values? I often, when I serve as fire chief in Greensboro, would say, does this help our standard of cover? Does this change improve our level of service? And I challenge my chief officers with that often. And I think those are good questions to ask. If it improves your service level, if it improves service to the people that you're in charge to protect, then it's probably a good thing. So mission, vision, and values. And as we think about those, what does our why do we exist as our mission? And we talked about that a moment ago with life and property, but what do we want to look like in the future? What's an ideal circumstance? What is, all of us realize that things change so dynamically. Who would have thought, what's 8 months ago now, that we would be in this situation we're in the pandemic? You can have the best plans, but you got to realize they change. But what do we think that needs to look like in the future? What are some ideal circumstances? And we have to be flexible, because things like pandemics and other challenges come up that we have no way of foreseeing. And so, but if you think about those values, what are your organization's values? What is foundational? That really becomes important. A couple of ideas there is keeping those type of things, mission, vision, and values, really trying to keep those simple as possible. And I would say here, get it off the wall and into people's heads. There's lots of organizations, I'm not just on fire service here, but have really great mission statements and documents and that type thing. And they may be on the wall, but I challenge you, ask the guys in this crew that we did some work for Harrisburg. This is a crew that I talked to one night, and ask them, what's your mission, what's your vision, what's your values? Do your frontline personnel know what those are? And just my experience with that is the simpler, the better in that. And try to involve everyone too. I use the term here, getting everyone's fingerprints, being able to get folks' involvement. And that's a big part of what we do. When you look for a third party group to come, sometimes you need folks to listen and don't have vested interest. And so one of the first things we start doing is stakeholder feedback, and listening and hearing, and then making sure that folks have an opportunity to give input. But you're going to hear this a lot today: communication with the folks involved at every level. That's certainly important in establishing mission, vision, and values. But it's an important part of strategic planning as well. Next, I want to discuss goals, objectives, and accountabilities. When we think about what are our organization's goals, what needs to be done, what's achievable, what is a desired outcome, what are we trying to achieve? Now, I put a picture of a pump panel over here on the side, and there's a reason for that. Pumping operations can be complex. Conditions change, your flow has to change, your supply might change. It takes a lot of variance to make a pump panel work. And those of you that have served as apparatus operators in one way or another understand that, and those that haven't know the value of it. So just thinking about some of the goals, objectives, and accountabilities, it can be complex and it has to be ever changing, but it takes all parts working together. What needs to be done in our organization? And there's ways that we will talk about in finding some of that out. Not only when we figure out what needs to be done, how are we going to get there? What are the steps to get us there? And where is there? What is success? What are we trying to shoot for? What is our goal? What are we trying to achieve long term? What will that look like? And then accountability. It's great to have ideas and concepts, but there has to be work done. And who's going to do that? Who's responsible for doing that in the organization? And most of us do better when we have deadlines. We have a track plan or a plan to work on, and increments, and breaking things down. Just like you go to a fire scene, you approach a fire scene, you start looking at sectors and breaking it down and looking at different components. Same type of thing here. You break it down, you look at components and establish deadlines and people responsible for those. So goals, objectives, and accountability, all very important in thinking about the concept of developing a strategic plan for your organization. Important to recognize things being dynamic. I tried to put a picture here of a GPS. Those are kind of changing with different car features and phones. But the concept is that you're heading in this direction, but you also have to realize you may hit a detour and you may have to go around a different way. And so keeping that flexibility, these are our goals, these are our objectives, these are who's responsible, but that can change from time to time based on how conditions change. Change is the law of life. Those who look only to the past or the present are certain to miss the future. So President Kennedy quote there. And so just realizing that change is going to happen, and this why strategic plan is valid for today. Tomorrow it may need some tweaking. The next day it may need tweaking. Next month it probably will. A very fluid, what I guess I would call a living document. Or living work product might be another way to say that, but it needs to be very dynamic. Data is so very important. I've gained a new appreciation for that in recent years, and the importance of data. Part of that, I think, is how fortunate we have been in recent years to have some of the more scientific data that we've ever had. I started in 1982 in Cleveland County. Data wasn't as important then as it is today. Data becomes more important. We become more dependent upon it. It's more important in what we do at the department level, at the organization level, and then the fire service level across North Carolina with Murphy to Manio. So data becoming very, very important in everything that we do today. And it's very important in strategic planning. Okay, so let's get under the hood a little bit here. And this is just a guy named Tommy Simmons that helps us some with looking at apparatus, and he's looking at some of the equipment in this picture. But let's get into some of the best practice pieces of strategic planning in North Carolina. Or this is what me and my team see throughout the state. We've had the chance to work in all areas of the state, and as different as the areas of our state are, they're also very similar. We recently did some work for Cabarrus County, more of an urban area near Charlotte, and at the same time we're helping Bertie County in the eastern part, very small county in the eastern part of the state. And while they're very different areas of our state, there are so many similarities. And so I think the more that we see of our differences, the more we find of our similarities. So we're going to kind of jump in and touch base on some of the top areas that are important in strategic planning. And I list these out, A, B, C, D. We're going to come back to them in the end, and also you can just kind of follow along as we go. Figuring out what your outcomes are. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? Who are the players? Who's going to be involved in this effort? That's an important piece. I think you have to put thought into what are we trying to do here? What are we trying to achieve? And then who's going to be involved? Who are the key stakeholders? Who are the people that are being impacted by this? This gentleman here is Jim Albright, EMS director in Guilford County, and this is actually at a fire station opening that we did. It's a joint fire station and EMS station in Guilford County. And that was a big part of what we were doing. We wanted to partner with EMS in this particular location, and it was very successful. In fact, Greensboro's continued to do more and more stations since I retired in partnership with EMS. But just as an example of who are the players, who are the people that are important to this outcome, and defining those, that has to be really done up front. And you have to figure out what's my methodology. There's no reason that you can't do effective strategic planning in-house. That you may have folks that are skilled and talented in your organization, and you can do that internally. My encouragement is that you do strategic planning. How you do it is certainly you have to figure out what's right for your organization. You can do it in-house, or you can outsource that. There's pros and cons to that, just like everything else in life. But you do have to think through, how do we want to do this, and think about those pros and cons. What's best for your organization and what's best long term. Often we see folks that haven't had a strategic plan to try to get it off the ground and implement that. And then it's really becomes a maintenance issue then. So it becomes much easier to maintain that in-house if they have that starting point. then it's easier to maintain it moving forward. Achieving buy-in. C is achieving buy-in at all levels. And we have a lot of different groups, some chiefs down here in the bottom. That was in Charlotte. So we have some folks more again from Harrisburg. We have a couple elected officials over here on the left-hand side, and an array of people in the middle. And so, we just try to think about all the different people that might be involved. Your municipal city management, town management, your county fire marshal or fire commission, or whoever you may work with. You're on the county side, but trying to achieve buy-in. This is what we're trying to do. You think about that direction, but you also have to think about your frontline firefighters. Remember earlier we talked about engagement and involvement and getting people's fingerprints on the work that you're doing. So all levels of your organization, from your command staff from your firefighters to your partners around you, to your elected officials and city management. Over on the left-hand side is New Bern, and we assisted New Bern with their strategic plan, and ended up going to the elected officials, and Chief Boyd has made great progress in implementing that. And if you call Chief Boyd today, he'd tell you it takes work continuing to keep it updated, and he's done a great job in doing so. But one of the reasons he was so successful is getting that buy-in. He had great buy-in from his city manager, assistant manager, and then it made it to elected officials, and they gave him great buy-in as well. We could tell similar stories of other places across North Carolina. Looking at current data and analysis, and analyzing that. Data is changing, readily, especially in areas that are growing. We did a station location project for Apex, and this is the picture down here is an example of some work we did for Apex, and looking at some of the threats and hazards that they had to protect. Any of the more urban areas of our state are growing so rapidly. Apex is just an example of that. But with the growth, so comes the need for change, and so comes the need to change the fire protection service delivery system. And so that's an example of that, and compiling that current data and analyzing it. We like to try to use peer review groups to do a lot of this work, because people from different organizations that are similar in size and community have a lot to bring to the table. And we often will ask folks who from similar size communities, as we try to facilitate these, come in and let's work on this. I think this picture in the lower right-hand corner is from Hendersonville, and I think Chief Wisnett is in that picture. But trying to get a group of people together that can look at common challenges and needs and issues, and offer ideas and suggestions. We'd call those best practices, because the great thing is everyone who participates, not only do they contribute, but they also leave with a better understanding. And we often find that the case. But really looking at data and trying to analyze that data, and we show a GIS system here, but incident reporting is obviously a key way in looking at data too. And a few years back, we'd done probably about 5 years ago, we had a number of firehouse users in North Carolina. It was clearly the most used records management system in North Carolina. I want to say the survey showed at the time somewhere around 70% of fire departments in North Carolina were using that product. That is not the case today. So the vendors have changed, the use of the data has changed, and so whatever you use, just seeing whatever is current and being able to work with that data to get information out. Listening to stakeholders, that becomes so important. We often come in and do what we call a SWOT analysis. We try to ask, what are the strengths of the organization? What's good? What's going on here that's positive and works well? And we try to listen to that and capture that. We also ask, where are the gaps? What are the things that are not so strong? Where are opportunities for improvement? And if nothing changes, what are the threats? And just listening and capturing all that information. Stakeholder groups really become important. Chief Boyd over here on the left-hand side, this is a commercial business owners group that he reached out to. So we think about reaching out to firefighters, we do that, but also reaching out to your public. And some do that. We do that by surveys sometimes, community surveys, sometimes face-to-face. Right now we're doing more surveys because of the pandemic, but sometime hopefully we can go back to having more one-on-one interaction as well. But whoever your stakeholders are, certainly listening to them and being willing to look outside your organization and see what other agencies are doing, see what other folks are involved with, and how they're working together. See what is working well in similar sized departments, and that's something we strive to do. Again, I would encourage you to do that. If you're doing your own strategic plan, try to look at practices that are successful elsewhere. Benchmarking becomes an important piece of strategic planning in North Carolina. Trying to look at similar size communities. Again, remember I said earlier, city managers say, what is good? Well, we can talk about national standards, but we also often have a question, well, how does that compare to other cities in North Carolina? And so data is only as good as the data out is only as good as the data in. But trying to look at how that department compares to similar departments is almost always of interest to city and county management. And so here's just a couple charts that we've done similar to that. But benchmarking, where do we perform in comparison to others? The key with benchmarking is it an apples to apples comparison? And that gets really difficult in data and incident reporting because of the different ways people report an incidents. But the use of benchmarking is certainly important. And looking at national standards, we have more data today than we've ever had with NIST and NIST studies and some of the 1710, 1720 standards. We have more national standards than we've ever had around what is effective and what is less effective in providing fire protection. There's a need to project some future challenges. What are our incidents today? What direction are they going in? And what are the areas of interest to your department? I want to show this chart for just a moment. This is a chart. This is just an illustrative example, but this is a chart from Cabarrus County. We just finished a study for them last month, and what this data shows is structure fires. So if you look at this chart across the bottom, the blue lines, those show structure fires that occurred, and those show the number of people that responded to those structure fires from the department that is involved. Well, the outcome of this, or the importance of this, is this red line, because if you look on the left hand side back in 2013, this is called a trend line. And so we were looking at this trend line. What was the average responses of numbers of firefighters back in 2013 all the way through 2019? Well, when you look, unfortunately, that trend line's diminishing because so many areas of the state are challenged with losing volunteers and the number of volunteers declining. Well, if you look at that number, that trend line over the period of time from 13, 14 to 18, 19, there's about a 25% decrease. So the number of firefighters responding to structure fires based on that data over time is decreasing. So you can get into the dynamics of well, this particular call, you'll see one there with 44. Okay, we know about why that call was what it was. But when you take things out of individual situations, or even sometimes that have unique reasons for what they are, what's the trend say? What direction are you going in? Is it getting more? Is it getting less? And so this is just an example of using that data to say that the trend is that you have fewer firefighters responding to structure fire calls in this, based on the data that we've received. So those become important trends. If you want to change that, then you've got to make changes in your organization in order to do so. Making recommendations is really the next piece of this. What are the recommendations that are needed? What are the things that are important to the organization? What are the specifics that need to be accomplished? And then prioritizing those. We all are going to have so many needs and things that need attention. What is most important? And I think there's value in saying we've got these 10 things that are really all important. Well, what's the 3 that are most important? What have we got to work on first? What needs the highest degree of prioritization? And it's really no different than an incident. This is a couple incidents here that I've been on, and the fire you see at the top is in Greensboro, when we almost had a line of duty death. Fortunately, did not. A fire in a repair shop where the roof collapsed on a crew, Captain Suttereth was severely injured and fortunately overcame that. But in an incident, you have to prioritize what's happening. Well, strategic planning, you also have to prioritize. We've got all these needs. What's most important? We can't do it all at one time. What are the top things that are important? And um, that becomes a piece that needs to be factored in. And then figuring out the timelines and responsibilities. Who's going to do what and how are you going to do that? Who's responsible? When are we going to have reporting dates and check-in dates and things like that that become important? There's software to do that, but you can make you a list and hold periodic meetings as well. So different ways of determining that. Written documentation becomes important too, because again, this should be a living document, but especially when you work with city managers and you work with town managers and county leadership at times, really trying to look at what are we doing, where are we with our plan. It's probably going to involve funding, and so does this need, is it consistent with the strategic plan and the documentation for that? And so these are some examples of some projects we have done. And we always try to give the fire chief good ammunition to say, well, this is why I need, we're working with one right now, the department right now, who is wanting to move to a Quint concept. Well, we've worked with ISO, and AC Daniels helps us with some of those ISO things. And so we've tried to talk about moving to a Quint concept and pros and cons to that for that department. And so as he works on that over a number of years, you'll probably need documentation that shows this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and here's what our plan is. We have to put those recommendations and priorities under a stress test. What are the things that are intended to happen and what might not? Questioning, challenging, trying to make them as solid as possible. So stress testing your recommendations, it becomes important, and that's done by putting a lot of heads together and trying to troubleshoot what might happen or might not, and anticipating those impacts. When you think about changes in the fire service, I'll put an EMS picture here too, because you think about, okay, we're doing this in our department. How can that affect other departments? Would that affect EMS? Would that affect other locations? We did a little bit of work with Stallings, and see a picture up here with them, and they're working with another department close to them. So changes they might make might work and impact a neighboring department as well. So other organizations, other departments, what are the intended consequences? What might be some unintended? And then the P is communicating, just communicating to your internal, communicating to your external. Here's where we are, here's where we're changing. We're making a change. If you get to the point you're making a change to your strategic plan, what does that change look like and why are we making it? So just continually communicating and engaging your stakeholders, continuing to keep them involved. Remember, keeping that thumbprint, because it's all really part of continuous improvement. We have to continually evaluate what we're doing, because conditions change, and we're living in a time that helps us really accentuate that. But you have to do work. And Walt Disney's quote here, the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. So you have to make steps and do things. And sometimes speed doesn't matter. You're moving forward. Even in a time of pandemic, with a strategic plan, we may not be able to move as far forward as we had planned, but we know where we're heading. We're trying to head in that direction. We're going to keep heading in that direction, and we're going to prevail. And you really have to make modifications again, because that continuous improvement cycle, your calls are changing, your needs are changing, your community is changing. And so all those coming together certainly require us to make modifications and continue to communicate at all levels, one-on-one, groups, discussions, involve people as best you can in your organization and your community. So I've got an outline here of everything we just covered: defining outcomes, figuring out your methodology, getting buy-in, compiling data, listening to the stakeholders, looking outside your organization, benchmarking, evaluating national standards, projecting future challenges, developing recommendations, prioritizing, determining timelines, having written documentation, putting things through a stress test, anticipating impacts on service delivery, communicating, engaging your stakeholders, engaging, communicating, evaluating that effectiveness, making modifications, and again, communicating what you're doing. So those are just some of the pieces that we see in North Carolina that are are principles of strategic planning and in the different departments that we work with and serve. And so we'll switch over and talk about some questions from the group today and share some of those. We encourage you to send something in to the chat. You can also, if you'd like to, we don't have that many folks on the call today. So if you would like to unmute and ask a question, our team will gladly try to address that and assist you with concerns or questions you might have. So let's open that up now to chat, or you can unmute, and we'd like to hear questions from the group, anything around the topics we've talked about here this morning. Okay, just while you're thinking about those, Wayne, did you have something you'd like to add?
Well, I just want to add a comment on the benchmarking. When we look at strategic planning, in a lot of cases, I think something that holds us back is we don't know where we're at. It's hard to move forward if you don't have a starting point. And one of the things that concerns me quite a bit when I look at the benchmarking is we're not measuring, in a lot of cases, outcomes. If you look at some of the, I'll give you the best example would be probably the police departments. When police departments do reports or benchmarking, they look at, crimes are being committed, arrests and convictions. Well, that picks up basically outcomes. We arrested somebody, we had a conviction. When we look at a lot of fire department reports, they capture a lot of data, but it doesn't tell me how did that data actually impact the community. So if we look at, we went to 50 calls for overdoses, or we went to 100 heart attacks. We need to produce some data that tells us what happened with that. What was our save percentage? What did we achieve with that? One of my pet peeves when we look at fire department incident reports is making sure we capture pre-incident data on what the property was worth prior to the fire. So we can tell just not what the dollar loss was, but what was the dollar saved. And my other comment associated with this also is to try to generate those, maybe an annual report. I'm a big believer in annual reports, and tie those annual reports to your budget requests. So you can tell your elected officials and the people that control your money, what did you do? You're asking for money in the future budget and for future purposes and in accordance with your strategic plan, but you also need to be able to produce and show what have you done with the past monies that have been given to you. So I think benchmarking is one of those things that's directly, when we talk about that tied to strategic planning, you really got to know where you're at to know where you're going. That's my comment, Chief.
Absolutely. And, I think so many times I've heard from city managers, okay, if you get this additional input, i.e. dollars, what's the outcome? If we give you this resource you're asking for, how's that going to change the dial? How's that going to change the outcome? And so you make a great point in the importance of that and tying it all together. Very good. Thank you, Chief. Chief Blackley does a lot of work with the community risk reduction piece, and that's kind of similar to some of those pieces there. Chief Blackley, is there anything you would like to add from that perspective to what Chief Hamilton shared?
I think when Wayne was talking about outcome measures, I think that is one of the key problems that we have is that we track all this data, but are we really looking at the data to determine whether or not we're making any changes? Because if we're not, we really need to reevaluate what we're doing and determine, is the program working? Is it not working? If it's not working, is it because of something we're doing? Do we need to look at other partnerships? I mean, I think there's really a lot that you can look at. And I just kind of see that's not just a problem in North Carolina, but really nationwide.
Absolutely. Okay. Very good. Chief Bullins, let me call on you for anything you feel like you would like to add based on what we talked about earlier, or anything that, from your perspective in the strategic planning. Chief Bullins and I have worked on several projects together, and not only is he helping these projects in North Carolina, but he's also a SIPC evaluator and travels across the country looking at departments similarly. So Chief Bullins.
Nothing really to add. I think that the presentation covers that very well. Just any of those are types of things that the fire departments is.
Okay. Good.
Is those, I'm sorry, my phone's call. Those are things that modern and credible fire departments do. So looking at strategic planning, getting outside input, all those things are what is needed in today's fire service as we move forward. So nothing really to add to. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Again, you can send in questions if you would like to do so, or you can unmute as well if you'd like to ask a question. We welcome that opportunity. Let me call on Chief Hutchins. And Chief Hutchins, up in Forsyth County, you have opportunity to work with municipal departments and volunteer departments and combination departments as they think about addressing this. What are your thoughts, Chief Hutchins?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks for that. I tend to agree with our colleagues that the strategic planning part is sometimes a little bit undersold. I think one thing I see is educating your younger officers, your junior officers, the value of strategic planning. And sometimes we tend to push those folks back to the tactical part of it. And I think you had good comments about the work that was done over in the Concord area. We're not responding to that many fires. So what are they doing in their spare time? Are they strictly looking at tactics, or are they looking at ways to improve the service? So I think you've got to include those folks. And it's sort of that managing up that we include those in strategic planning. Good comments from everyone, though. I agree with everything you had in your PowerPoint. Looked great.
It's so important to try to get everybody involved with it, because then there's ownership and understanding. And so I know, we covered so many points there that was about communicating and involving and stakeholders, but that's just so essential to having an effective strategic plan. Chief Perry, I'd like to call on him for just a moment. Chief Perry serves as fire chief in Zebulon, but he also was recently served as the town's planning director too, for an interim period of time. So when we think about the department strategic plan, it also has to work with the community strategic plan and what's happening in the larger community. Chief Blackley does some of that connection as well in the work that he does with us in trying to see what's happening with the development plan. How does the fire protection plan factor into that? So Chief Perry, you've seen kind of both sides of that issue in Zebulon. Anything that you would like to add about that?
The only thing I would add, Chief Grayson, is that I think for each of us, there's so many different moving parts, whether it's our the growth of our communities that we're dealing with, or our staffing changes, or our potentially our volunteers, if they're how they recruitment, retention. There's just so many moving parts, especially when you couple that with our like you said, our sister and brother agencies of planning departments and inspections departments and such of that. We really rely on that strategic plan to give us some grounding and to kind of keep our focus, because there's just so many moving targets out there. It makes it difficult to keep our eye on the prize, so to speak. So I think that's where the strategic plan comes out really well and gives us some guidance. Thank you
very much. Thank you. All right. Well, we appreciate your help with that. Okay. Any other questions from the group this morning? Anything anyone would like to ask? Either unmute and ask or send in on chat. Okay. Well, next month we're going to come back about the same time each month, and we have a program planned for November as well as December. November's is really going to look at that professional development piece, and we're going to speak to some components of that. We're also going to have Dan Jones and Kelly Walsh with us, a group that we work with some as well, that teach all over the country and share what they're doing, how they're doing, and how that might work for North Carolina, and how that might work for your department in helping advance your professional development for you as fire chief, for your chief officers and your younger officers coming up through the ranks. So we thank you for taking time to be with us this morning. Thank you for sharing your valuable time. we hope this is helpful to you. Feel free to reach out to us any way that we can. We will be posting this on our website, and I'll get with Chief Wisnett about how they want to connect that for the Association of Fire Chiefs. We always welcome your ideas and suggestions and input to me and any of our NC Fire Chief consulting team. We encourage you to stay safe during these difficult and challenging times, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. Okay, that'll conclude today. Thank you all so very much.